Desert Sanctuary with Karl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion, or we want to be contemplative, or simply ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to welcome you to our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that resonate with our fellow friends and seekers here in the desert.
Our hope is that you will find life for your body, soul, and spirit.
And now, here is our show.
Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. We're glad that you're with us today. My name is Laura Forehand. I'm here with Karl Forehand. And before we get on to our guests today, was there anything that you needed to remind listeners about or share anything with them?
Yeah, I think when this comes out, our book will already be released leading forward. So that'll be out. And so I really don't need to talk about that.
Okay.
Really don't need to talk about YouTube or anything like that. Just like and subscribe stuff, all that stuff. Every time I promote it, it goes down instead of up. So I'm going to let you do that from now on.
Okay.
But that's not why we're here.
No.
We're here to talk to Karen.
We are here to talk to Karen. And Karen, just to give you a little background, she writes about white evangelicalism for national outlets and is a co-host of Deconversion Therapy, a comedy podcast about the oddities of organized religion. She is a former Christian and evangelical missionary. She lives in the Bible Belt and spends too much time on social media, which I can totally relate to. So welcome to the podcast, Karen. We're glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Karen. So we've done about 280 of these. I think this is number 282.
Wow.
Such a privilege to hear people's stories. We think of stories as sacred, and that if we'll just listen and believe the stories, then we've learned a lot. In fact, that's a lot of what the book we're releasing is the lessons we've learned just from listening to people's stories.
Oh, that's great.
It's so great.
Yeah.
But we want to hear your story and fill in the blanks.
Sure.
In whatever detail you want. So whenever you're ready.
Sure. So for people who haven't heard about our podcasts or social media, we started it, Deconversion Therapy, about 5 years ago. My best friend, who I've known since I was 1 year old, crazy. She kept saying, we have so many funny stories from growing up in the Southern Baptist Church together. She wanted to start a podcast probably 7 years ago. And I said, no, because I know I am 100% person, as you can see by the ex-missionary part there. I'm all in. And so once I agreed to it, that's what I do all day long, every day. And we decided to just go with comedy. And at the time, first of all, the word deconversion wasn't a word. We took the idea of conversion therapy, which is a terrible thing for LGBT people.
Right.
And we flipped it as in, listen, all of it's bad. And we put in deconversion. And back then, the word deconstruction wasn't being used. I was on Twitter, and there was really Blake Chastain who coined the word exvangelical. There was the scholar Chrissy Stroop. There was Seth Andrews. But as far as people who had been Christian and left now, or left the evangelical church and remained either spiritual or Christians, there are so many, and the word deconstruction and or deconversion is everywhere. And so I feel like we have to re-explain it to people because it wasn't a word back then. We were just, talking, relating it also to like retail therapy. Hey, let's talk about this funny stuff. So my friend and I, Bonnie, we met when we were 1. Her mother had moved from California onto our street. We'd moved down to South Florida also from Buffalo, New York. And her mother was a single mother. and found out, what preschool I was going to. Oh, let's ride together. So we've known each other this whole time. And even though we walked in different circles sometimes, we still, just like if you see anyone from, when you were young, you're like, remember the time, blah, blah, blah. And we started the podcast thinking there's not going to be a lot to talk about. We're over 215 episodes ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we take things like telling the story of Jim Baker and how he is a televangelist and sells buckets of food for people because, they need it because the end of the world's going to come. Mm-hmm. And we just, talk about different televangelists or different movements or different things, telling the history of it, but always not talking about trauma. We really feel that is something we don't want to do in our space so that people have a respite from that. And now there are so many good podcasts with, real therapists or people talking about different abuses in different churches. And they do great at that. And we just stick with sort of the fun, silly stuff.
So I'm a former Southern Baptist pastor.
Oh, dear. No.
I know, right? And so I know that maybe trauma has been something in your life, but your idea is, let's don't do that here. This is where we're going to do something different, right?
I'm going to tell you something funny,
all right.
which is not funny, but I was fortunate that I was not hurt by the church or by any particular people. Of course, you can always look back and go, oh, that person was a real beep, beep, whatever. But specifically, that wasn't why I left. That wasn't anything to do with that. And it was probably 3.5 years into our podcast where both of us said, wait, I think I do have religious trauma. But for me, it is more from the practice of being so fervent in prayer, constantly in my mind, giving it up to God, but praying really hard, praying without ceasing, then praising, then letting it go. And then there's sort of a release. But then you pick it up again because it didn't get answered. And I realized that day in and day out trained my body into this anxiety, up and down, hormonal nearly, adrenaline that my body remembers. And it didn't hit me for a long time. I felt bad for all these people who have religious trauma, but I always thought it had to be like the bad stuff.
Right.
But yeah, it can be very sort of underground and sort of that quiet hum to your life that you finally put 2 and 2 together and go,
Yeah. There was a space where you weren't cared for, or the beliefs and practices actually moved you away or helped you bypass what that practice was doing to you or what that belief system was doing to you. There's a lot of things in the Southern Baptist Church you can pick from.
Yes. And then I moved out of that and I did get into the charismatic non-denominational. So, I there's that feeling of, wait a minute, Southern Baptists, we're talking to God. These other people hear from God. I want that. And so there was a bit of that. I walked into a Pentecostal one once or twice by accident, got a little scared. They can enjoy, it was just, when you go to a Southern Baptist church, going into a Pentecostal church is, you feel threatened. You feel physically uneasy because you are not used to relaxing your body like that. And you guys might be the same age as me, but Southern Baptists, like, we dressed up. We had pantyhose and pumps and big gold buttons and hairspray. Like, even our bodies were very, protected in this weird way.
Yeah.
So to just be barefoot, twirling around, no, couldn't do it.
Yeah, for sure. So since your podcast, relies on humor, who's the funniest?
Me.
There you go.
Joking. I am joking.
Not on your podcast. All the preacher people out there and stuff like that. Who is who has the most material for you to talk about?
You
have a top 3 or?
That's the thing. I'm going to say the top 3, but, of course we've got Jim Bakker, which I think it's very convenient because, as you know, there are theologies of pre and post millennial that either Jesus is going to return and take all the Christians, and then all the bad people are left here for 1,000 years until the world collapses or whatever, or premillennial, where even the Christians are going to have to suffer. So Jim Bakker has to believe in premillennial, or he can't sell his buckets for Christians to go in the bunker. So I love that. And if you've seen his videos, he puts all the buckets together and puts a tablecloth over it. And he's like, it can be your table. I mean, you can't make it up.
Yeah.
I also was just talking about Carmen, and I feel a little bad because Carmen, the singer, he did pass away. But when you look into different things, it's fascinating. And I was giggling just today thinking about Carmen. For people who don't know, he was a Christian singer that almost was like David Hasselhoff. He was always showing his chest, and he had these extravagant performances. And I would, as a counselor at one of his concerts, and the power I had wearing that shirt with counselor on the back, you should be humble as a Christian, but you feel a little special because people know you're a little godly. But while we were researching him, we found out he had this hobby of making clocks, which sounds good. But they weren't clocks. They were digital art of clocks faces. So it was not a working clock. And then he would those cafe clocks that would have like Coca-Cola. He made those, and he called it Carmen art. And he made all different ones, and he would have people vote on them. And he's like, this is my hobby. And I'm like, I don't understand. They don't work. What's happening? And then the whole deal was, if you print it up at home and you bring it to the concert, he'll sign it for you. And I just can't imagine hey, Dad, can I use the printer? And printing up like a cartoon clock face with Mr. Peanut on it, breaking trademark, and taking it to things like that. Entertain me.
Yeah. I remember after watching the Mars Hill. Is that the right one?
The Hill Song?
Well, we watched Hillsong.
Yeah, there's a lot.
We also watched the Mars Hill documentary about Mark Driscoll and his church, and that was, I think, Christianity Today did that one. It was a long podcast series.
Yes.
I remember watching the whole series. I got down to the last episode, and I was finishing up as I walked in the house, and I remember just weeping over that. And we're not a big fan of bypassing things, but sometimes you just have to talk about it in a lighthearted manner, or you get angry. Right? I mean, I listened to a couple episodes of your podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fun. and you guys were talking, you know, you could tell you had researched what you're talking about, and you're, you know, it was good. It was good and solid, but it was also funny. And nothing, I don't think there's anything with that. You gotta, it's just seems like it's a pretty crazy situation out there right now. You know what I mean? And not just, I think that's funny also that your door keeps opening back.
I'm so sorry. That's my ancient dog with one eye. And boy, he's confused. He doesn't know what's happening.
Oh,
Ours is not that ancient, but he has similar tendencies.
he's a mess.
He kind of wants to be everywhere.
Well, I think, you know, the humor was really, it was just my friend and I. We didn't know anyone was going to hear. We haven't even told like all our friends that we know, because we just wanted it to be us having fun. And it's done a lot for our friendship and all these things. But I think when we started looking at things, first of all, we would research and go, oh no, like there's, as she says, there's no funny in this. So we have a lot of topics that, and preachers, and we do cults once in a while that we can't touch because, and if we do once in a while, we tell people we're not going to give you details. We're not going to talk about trauma. But I think it ended up being something that we didn't realize people were looking for. And I think it also gives people space to get into new topics and new potential information that they get an easy way in, like a zero entry pool. Like they can get in and not feel like they're drowning in a lot of the terrible stuff. And it can spark something where they say, I want to hear a different podcast and get more into it, or I want to watch something or whatever. So like with Mark Driscoll, what we focused on was his crazy forum, that he had a church forum and he went in there and he was insulting people left and right under the name William Wallace because he sees himself as this ridiculous warrior. And I mean, that's where we find the funny. We find it in certain men just somehow wanting to live out their, you know, if I had lived back then, I would have been, you know, Nero. I would have been, you know, Alexander the Great. And so they live out these weird little fantasies. And every once in a while you get a little peek into it because they go on their own church forum. So, you know, we don't, I can see how it is very upsetting, a lot of these things. And we do have to skirt around a lot of them.
Yeah.
I think that's important though, that you know, are taking that into consideration and recognizing that people have been, you know, hurt by certain aspects of certain denominations or preachers or whatever. So, I mean, I think then you turn around and you do that in a very tasteful way. And like you said, really censor yourself, or just have that reflectiveness about yourselves where you're like, you know, we're not going to get anything funny out of that. So we're just going to put that back here. Yeah. For me, like my question to you is, so if you're researching and like, or you're in the middle of recording a podcast with your friend and something does kind of, you know, maybe hit you like, oh, that may be some trauma, you know, like, do you guys have a way that you can then like take a step back and process that yourselves? Do you guys find a way to do that?
Yeah, I think the main thing is when it comes up, because our podcasts, we try and tell everyone we are not professionals. We are two close friends, and we're having as good of a time as we can. And when we hit something that it's usually me, because I do most of the research or something, we use all your favorite glowy words, and I can get upset and just go, how beeping crazy is that? And she'll go in with it too. And so we get to sort of let it out. But if we're talking about trauma, and because you guys, probably it's more on your podcast, if we're talking about, and this is going to be a shocker, but it is usually a man in power doing something with a young person. And we just say, oh, and guess what? And she'll say, oh, let me guess. Is it a man in power doing something? And I'm like, how'd you guess? So we sort of do a little jump over so what happened was, but we want to be clear that
But I think when you say it that way, you are making it clear, like, we're not cool with that at all. Like, so I think that's really like good that it gives your listeners this, like, we're not, like, this isn't cool. We're not condoning that, which I know you're not. But I think, like, for somebody like me that would listen to your podcast, that would, I don't know, that would speak to me in a very real way. Like, they're not just like, trying to be funny, but they're really seeing, like,
exactly.
This is like, we may not go into it here, but let me guess. Yeah. And for me, I would be like, yeah, they get it,
Yeah. And the rule is always punch up. So, we're going to punch up to Mark Driscoll. We're not going to punch down to one of his victims, or a different victim or whatever. Yeah. And we also don't even mention names of certain different people that might be involved, just because why make any kind of platform about someone's worst day of their life, So
that's good.
That's good.
Yeah. We try and avoid.
Sometimes I use the phrase, and you probably have heard this before, and you may have used it, but toddlers in charge. On a serious note, I really think that we've got a problem with white males in power.
Okay, I'll agree.
Our previous president is one example of that. It's not the only example of that, but then in churches we bypass trauma. We don't deal with it, and people that can speak well and are pretty get to lead the whole congregation and lead a corporation, basically, and it's. We were talking to our last guest, who's somewhat of a therapist and so on, but she, there's these toddlers in charge that can't, they don't have time, number one, plus they're the celebrity, plus, they're God's anointed person. And so, and I used to say, as a pastor, who can I tell? And it was hard, not to make an excuse, but then, but the question I asked her was, so I said, we probably already answered this, but the question is, why does my pastor respond to stress like a 5-year-old? Well, it's all of the above that we talked about for an hour. He's got all of that stuff, and many times somebody says, is Hitler going to be in heaven? And I always say, I don't like to have theological debates anymore. It's just makes my soul hurt. But if I were to consider that, I would see him as a little boy crying in heaven. It's, and that's how I tend to see some of these. But the tension is, but they're abusing people. I feel sorry for them, but they're seriously abusing people and ruining people's lives. And that's what makes me angry. So I like that you describe your podcast as a refuge, a place kind of pull back from that for a while, and let's just have a little bit of fun.
Yeah. And we do hit the serious topics. So if we're talking about Hillsong and all this stuff, and there was a lot of abuse in that by the father, and then Brian Houston himself, and then Karl. And, we get to joke about what you're saying, pretty much toddlers. Like they were, Brian Houston and Karl, what's his name? I've said it. Thank you a million times. We're having a dick measuring contest. Brian was jealous of Karl. And so we get to present it as dick measuring contest. While people can look at, it is harmful. And then we do go and do some serious stuff, but we always try and pull it back. I think a huge issue that I don't know how it's going to get rectified is the problem, I'm putting in air quotes, of forgiveness. Because the narrative has been, if you ask forgiveness, you're forgiven. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's between you and your God. And that has given a lot of allowance for people to stay in positions they should not be in, because there's been an understanding that if someone asks forgiveness and they really seem like they have, that there is some kind of healing that other people can trust in. But we have seen over and over again, that's absolutely not true. Mm-hmm. So with the Southern Baptist Convention's 240 pages of abusers coming out, my ex-pastor did not, nothing that he's abused, but he did block me on Twitter, but that's okay. I saw that at my church, they had let someone in leadership go because they had done something to a 15-year-old. Let them go to another church where they did it again. Mm-hmm. And luckily the family had him arrested. But when you use the word bypassing, it reminds me of how the church can sometimes bypass the criminal system, because it isn't always seen as God's system. Mm-hmm. We're going to let God handle this and all that. And that's been something that we see over and over. I was just talking on TikTok about a terrible thing, cold case that just got solved this week, 50 years old. And it, 8-year-old girl disappeared, walked into Vacation Bible School. They arrested a pastor. He has been a pastor in 5 states now since 1965 to 2005. This whole time. Mm. And he got turned in because people sort of knew, but they were afraid to tell.
Right.
Or the whole, let's keep it in our church or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. See, now you guys are getting me. You're getting me riled up.
I'm sorry. So forgiveness and unconditional love mm-hmm. are abused by the church, and routinely, mm-hmm. Systematically, when it works to your advantage.
Yeah, and pastors. I mean, pastors we put on these pedestals. I mean, I saw people trying to do that with Karl, and it made me nauseated.
In my case, it was deserved. No,
I can only imagine as a wife just going, "Oh, well, you guys, that's my husband. Yeah, he's in his boxers. He didn't pick up after him.
Video.
Yeah,
but I mean,
it would be hard.
That's that's part of the problem too, in my opinion, is that we put these pastors on these pedestals, and then there's almost like this, I don't know if this is the right word, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but like this cognitive dissonance that goes on. So it's like, well, he's a man of God and he's mm-hmm. doing this, this thing, and like, who can I tell? Should I tell? But he's a man of God. And I mean,
right.
Just becomes, because of his position, he's allowed to get away with a lot of things, or, you know, and it could be a she too, but typically we just see, you know, from what I'm seeing, like of the Southern Baptist, or I think that's what it is, Baptist Accountability, that I see on Facebook. It's mostly white men, you know, in the ministry that are the ones that are committing these heinous acts against typically children. So,
yeah.
Were you all around? Do you remember there was a certain kind of theology or dogma that went around, and it was sort of after Jimmy Swaggart for the youngins. He was a white male. You can guess the rest. And, but there was this thing that you should not condemn God's leaders, because if you do, your safety net is, and I'm like, what? So it perpetuated the silence. It perpetuated the not criticizing. You know, you just need to pray for them. Just pray for them. So yeah, we heard a lot of that.
So that, you know, that leads to prayer can be used as bypassing too.
Oh yeah.
So many things can be abused and used as bypassing, you know, in
churches. You're just talking about IBLP.
Oh yeah.
With what's his name?
Gothard.
Yeah, Bill Gothard kind of took that to a new level where, you know, it's not just such wrong for accusing him, but what did you do wrong?
Yeah.
And,
right.
You know, why can't you let this go?
Or, you know, the flip side of that, where, you know, well, God's going to use this to, like, you know, make you a better person.
That's right.
I'm going to call bullshit on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some videos recently, and I have a rule on TikTok. Like, I don't know if you've been on there, but I like it. It's a nice little community. I do lives, which means anyone can join in. The vileness in my comments. Straight Christians cannot handle it. And it doesn't bother me. I let the comments speak for themselves about where modern Christianity is today. But I don't go into Christians' lives and ever say anything or do anything, but I see a lot of them. And it really hurt me. A woman had, I think, lost her baby, and she was like, but this is all God's will, and something great's going to come out of it. And just the actual backflips she would have to mentally do to put herself in this even more hurtful, submissive place of do anything. I have no bodily autonomy now, you know, not just spiritual. That really hurts me deeply, you know, and that's when I do want to go in and say, no, but I don't know when people are suffering. I'm
right.
Yeah. It's not a good time to go, guess what? No, it's not a good time, but it's hard.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing about comedy?
Yeah.
So I'm going back. This is what I do. I kind of wander around with my thoughts. So my son is he's 32 now, and he's very funny. And we've
very
talked,
dry sense of humor.
We've talked about how some people think they're funny, but I've always told people he actually is. And I think, you know, what I want to say about humor is not bypassing usually. Humor is an intelligent way to get past people's watchful dragons. You know, the defense systems they have
Exactly.
And humor helps in good humor. You know, it's amazing to me that Netflix is known for comedy specials, and 80% of them aren't funny at all.
Right.
You know?
Oh, I know.
But
I started watching one. I was like, ooh, yeah.
When you find one that's truly funny, it's like, that guy's a genius. That, you know, or what's Kathleen Madigan?
Yeah, we like her.
A genius, you know. And I think it's a great tool, you know, to get past people's defenses, you know, because we're so armored up. And all this spiritual stuff, all the church stuff, everybody's armored up. But if we can laugh together, maybe that's one of the solutions.
And it's a great way to give people information. There's this comedian, Bill Burr, and he was on a talk show, and he does a lot of religious humor. And of course, the people who were hosting said to him, don't you think you're taking it a little too far with the Catholic Church? And he said, don't you think they've been taking a little too far? And, it was this laughable moment that also went viral. But if Bill Burr came out and said, there's a lot of child abuse in the Catholic Church, that's not going anywhere.
Right.
And it's not making people laugh and tell it to the next person, tell it to the next person. And so there is definitely one of our quote heroes is Ricky Gervais sometimes, because he can deliver something so profound that it's a double take. It's you get it on the first thing and then you think about it and then you go, oh, that's very deep. So.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love it when it makes you think. And I really like what you said about it not being bypassing, which I never really thought about that. But it's true, because it's like you're speaking truth. You're just doing it with humor in mind. And I think that's such a creative way to get information across to people. I think that's,
I don't know, you can really tell creative. We're really intense. We kind of get down to deep stuff really fast. And somebody has to do that. But
humor is seen as bypassing when it's defensive humor. So if someone is telling me about something serious and I joke back, that's a bypassing. So we use it as a storytelling method, but actually we're also, oblivious. We're just friends and sometimes trying to make each other laugh, depending. And sometimes we are the only ones laughing and we don't care.
That's all right.
If that's true, we don't care.
Yeah.
I doubt if that's true. But I want somebody to teach me how to laugh louder, because if I was in an audience and the comedian was making people laugh and all of them were like me, the room would be silent because I don't laugh.
That's me.
I laugh.
I don't either.
You can't hear me unless you're really close.
Same with me. I either don't laugh because my brain has already guessed the joke, or, I'm like, everyone's laughing. It's not that, I'm not going to give a pity laugh.
Yeah.
I went to a comedy club in New York and it was horrible. I was clapping and I decided to stop clapping. And my friend was like, clap, they're practicing their comedy. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't need to practice clapping. Like I can't do this anymore. We got suckered in by someone on the street. That's what happened.
Yeah.
But I don't have an audible laugh, and my co-host has a huge laugh.
Yeah.
So if she wasn't there laughing at everything, but mine's inaudible and usually just sounds like asthma if I'm laughing hard. I wish I had a laugh.
Yeah, I start coughing if I laugh.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
That's me.
Awesome. So we're so happy you agreed to come talk to us a little bit on whatever night it was, Tuesday night.
Sure.
Speaking of coughing.
Yeah, exactly.
So my dad joke is, what one casket said to the other casket? Is that you coughing?
Oh, here he's coming. You're going to take over our slot. If anything happens to Bonnie, you're in.
You probably should take Laura because she laughs loud.
I do laugh louder.
Yeah.
That's good. I envy that.
So kind of summarize again the podcast. So give us the name, where we can find it and stuff like that.
Sure. It is Deconversion Therapy Podcast. I've now put therapy, now that deconversion is a known word, we also put therapy in quotes, because guess what? There's now deconversion therapists in the last year. I'm like, what? Although I think everyone's just trying to make a buck, and that's all I'm saying about that. But so that's what we do. We do a podcast weekly. It's every other week in the summer. We have a TikTok and an Instagram, and all of them have a different feeling to them. So our Instagram is even a little more like harsh. And that really is just because we steal memes, and some make it, some don't. And then TikTok is more thoughtful and serious, can be about trauma, and the podcast is always light. And then we have a Facebook group where we leave them alone. They talk to each other. They share anything they want, whether it's memes or I'm having a hard time, or, we really do have a lot of people in the LGBT community, and they write us, and a lot of them don't have family anymore. So we've found a lot of people who see us as, oh, I wish you were my aunt or my mother or whatever it is, all those elderly things, which is lovely. But yeah, everything just has a little bit of a feeling to it. And then in my writing, I might take on, I did one about why evangelicals don't wear masks at the beginning of COVID, or how purity culture actually affects women physically. Did that for Jezebel, and the other one was for Huffington Post. So we have all these sides to us, and that's why it's so fun with the podcasts, just to be like, can you believe Jim Baker did this, or whatever it is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We often ask people and never prepare and never give questions ahead of time. I hope that isn't mean, but
I like it.
Billboard, if you had a billboard that everybody in the world could see, what would you put on your billboard? And it can be long if you want to, but preferably short where people can remember it.
Stop whistling. That's it.
Stop.
I hate whistling.
Okay, no one can see, but I am pointing at Karl because he does it like, stop.
Yes, it is white men of a certain age. There's a man whistling in the coffee shop today. I knew right away. I didn't even have to see him. When I saw him, I was like, I know it's you. It's never, even a white man in his 20s. I don't know what it is.
So you think it's connected to privilege then?
It's like a cat's bell to warn us that you all are coming.
Oh gosh, that's funny.
I don't know. But if it's the billboard to talk to other people, like what my message would be to other people, you don't have to continue to think and live the way you were raised. In fact, you shouldn't. I think that's really important. I could go on and on about how that has played out in my life and how I still have difficulties at my age. Yeah. Wanting to please parents and all that. So
we've got a little bit of time if you want to expound on it. Go ahead.
Sure. So I grew up Southern Baptist. My father's from Cuba. And if you were the daughter and the youngest of a man from Cuba, that's it. You ride your bicycle in your driveway. Like, you're so protected for the rest of your life, even today. And then them being Southern Baptist and getting to a point that you realize you don't believe the same way as your family, but you're going to disappoint them. A lot of people get in touch with us and ask, what do I do? My parents are super religious. I'm not, whether that's no belief or different belief. And my advice is always, one, are you physically safe? Are you in the house with them? Are you of a certain age? Are you physically safe? Because unfortunately, there are people who are not, even if that is, financial and food access abuse, which unfortunately happens. And then the next is everyone has to decide. My father is Christian, my brother is Christian and Southern Baptist and all that. And I have decided to put relationship above religion. He can't always do that because he thinks he's helping me, and wants to see me in heaven and all that. But I've made a conscious decision that our relationship is something that I want to preserve and keep. And we have, and we're very close. And I don't let our different religions get in the way. And he did cry to me about 2 years ago saying, I'm just so sad and afraid you're not going to go to heaven. And I said, if there's a God and he is all loving, then I'll see you there. And that's really all I could offer him. And I know that man. I know on his last breath, he's going to be like, Karen, turn to the Lord. He's going to do it to me. And I know he's going to. And I've already prepared how not to feel guilty even after he's gone. Because if you grow up in constant guilt and shame and people pleasing, it's always, it's a layer. It's part of your fascia that's just right there under the skin. That it takes a lifetime to try and, uncover and do all that. So that is just sort of my way to honor him as a person and as my father. But a lot of people have sucky parents. And in that way, I always say, go to a therapist. They need to get some kind of feeling with an outside person, either helping them, telling them resources or whatever, because going no contact with parents for a small percentage of people is necessary. And then for a lot of other people, it's more of an extreme measure out of emotion that doesn't need to be taken right then, depending. So we get a lot of DMs about that, and we love them and then sort of turn them in directions that we can. But for me, it's been a bit of a struggle. I am not totally free in that way. And I'm in the South. So today I was at a coffee shop and it's always next to me, like, how God, he did this and he told me move to this place. And I'm like, wow, God tells you to move to rich white places. So it's so good. And so they're doing that. And I'm like, I've never heard like Wiccans or pagans or atheists just, talking as loudly as that, just going, the Bible is just taken from the Epic of Gilgamesh. You just never hear that. And in the South, we would get chased out. I mean, it's people are scared of everything that isn't at their church is demonic. So that includes us.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And I think, when you think that you're right and God is on your side, then you can justify a lot of things, and you certainly have to defend that because you're right, and your pastor agreed with you. So we've definitely got to change all those things we're afraid of.
As Anne Lamott said, isn't it a coincidence that your God hates all the same people you do? It's always
indeed. Karen, this has been good. It's been rich. I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us.
And it's really good. I see you guys smiling. Like, that's what we like to do because we understand now the nervous system and, the cellular level and what science is saying about these things. And so many people are going through so much that it's good to just take a little while and also realize how ridiculous some of the things that we participated in was, and to be okay with, some ridiculous things we participated in. I just really enjoy trying to convert Jewish people as an 8th grader. It's a great memory. And we all have that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We just have to chalk it up and laugh at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did the best we could with what we knew.
Right.
Exactly.
Now we can do better.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for joining us. This has been good. Usually when we do podcasts, when we record later in the evening, like we are this one, it's usually super heavy, and then I can't sleep because it's just been really heavy. So I'm like, oh man, this has been good to like you said, to smile and kind of laugh and just, but still talk about some seriousness too, just kind of have it all. So anyway, thanks so much for being with us today on the podcast. And
what I think you're saying is I have given you nothing to think about.
No.
And that's my gift. That's what I do.
I thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll cherish it.
Good. Thank you guys so much.
The podcast is called Deconversion Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for tuning in today. As always, we invite you to be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary.
Remember, all that wander in the desert are not lost. We hope that you know
you are seen,
you are heard,
and you are loved.